Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites.
Jésus, par ton sang précieux, enlève mon iniquité. Regarde-moi sur les cieux, dis-moi que tu m'as pardonné. J'ai longtemps erré cœur rebelle, mais j'entends ta voix qui m'appelle. Au pied de ta croix maintenant, tout confus, brisé, je me rends. Blanc, blanc, plus blanc que neige, blanc, plus blanc que neige, lavé dans le sang de l'agneau, je serai plus blanc que la neige.
Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. 1 Samuel 15.
Greetings, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this 50th episode of God is Not White. My name is Jacques Dessalines, and I greet you from Ottawa, Gatineau, the capital of Canada, where the meeting called the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti took place on January 31st, February 1st, 2003. And that meeting led to the kidnapping of the president of Haiti, Dr. Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and his wife, and putting Haiti under UN tutelage, something that we mention regularly in this program. As you can see, these days, the kidnapping of presidents that the United States doesn't like has become commonplace. This evening, we have an episode that is filled with information and reflection that we want to share with you, and we are inviting you to please share this presentation with folks you know might be interested in the topic of Judeo-Christianity and people of African descent, how we are negotiating our relationship with that superstition, and in the modern era, as it has become part of the political discourse to talk about what they used to call Christendom. That is, the Christians are on a crusade, and the president of the United States is talking about invading Nigeria to free the Christians, and they're talking about all kinds of apocalyptic revelations and type of things that they need to do in the Holy Land, and that's the white Christian nationalist around Donald Trump, and the consequences that these things have for our lives as people who are free thinking individuals. Okay, so tonight we will be focusing on our neighbor, Cuba. Cuba is also facing the attacks of the United States, and we are calling upon folks of goodwill to consider whether Cuba should be considered our brother and us the keeper of our brother. We say if Jesus existed, he'd stand for Cuba, and we ask the question, what are you and I doing today with regards to those brazen attacks on our brothers and sisters in Cuba? We had looked at various chapters, as this program, as you know, is based on my book, Vive Bon Dieu à bas religion, published in 2000, translated literally, Praise God Down with Religion. And as a son of Episcopalian priests, that is, Africans who created the Episcopalian Church in Haiti, who are descendants of formerly enslaved individuals in the United States who found freedom and refuge in Haiti. As someone who grew up in that Christian denomination, the several questions that I had that remain unanswered led to that search and the publication of the book in the year 2000, basically looking at the distinction between what the God that is described in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in the books of the Bible, or the God that we can perceive, for some of us, through nature, the character of whatever entity would be at the origin of all things, as opposed to what is practiced, taught, described through the practice of Judeo-Christianity. And so this is the comparison that we do in chapter 2 of the book when we discuss religion. And then in chapter 3, we talk about what freedom might look like, freedom from religion. And then in the presentations that we've been doing, the 49 episodes before this one, we looked at the ramification of people of African descent submitting or adopting the Judeo-Christian superstition that was imposed upon us through colonization, enslavement, torture, and all of these practices of the colonizers, who, for the most part, were Christian and some of them Jewish, after the Muslims who also subjugated and attacked the Africans. Today, our focus, like I said, is Cuba. Cuba, an island in the Caribbean, which is our closest neighbor uh, uh, from the Haitian perspective. And we've mentioned Cuba a couple of times in previous episodes, but tonight the focus is squarely on our brothers and sisters in Cuba. We will analyze ethical choices faced by individuals as well as nations that are invited to respond to urgent calls for brotherly support in a season of deadly global conflicts. Uh, Here, the attention is on Cuba. These people are resisting 6 decades of incessant bullying by the United States of North America. And so we will share with you a couple of videos in addition to this excerpt, sorry, in addition to the slides that we're sharing with you here. And the Cuba Will Never Surrender video is one that I find particularly interesting, and I hope you also will find it of value. This is to set the table, set the stage for our discussion. And I'm hoping that at the end of this presentation, I might entertain a couple of phone calls to hear what your view is of our responsibility. Are we our brother's keepers? Must we do or say something with regards to this conflict in Cuba? Must we, as some I've heard on social media express, that, well, if we live in the United States, we must stand on the side of the President of the United States, whatever his decision might be? Hmm. I have a feeling that most of you watching do not buy it this way, but there might be nuances, and I would like to hear your own take on the matter. But let us begin with this video. This is just a brief excerpt, just to talk about the spirit that many Cubans have now as their nation is bracing for more strife at the hands of the powerful United States of North America and their infamous president, Donald Trump, one that is unlike any other president that they've ever had before. Let us listen.
No nos rendimos, no nos vendemos. Patria muerte, venceremos. Aquí la historia no la escriben los cañones de un imperio. Ellos mandan muerte y ruina sobre los pueblos. Nosotros mandamos médicos. ¿Quién defiende de verdad a la humanidad? Si nuestra soberanía molesta al poderoso, es porque aprendimos a decir no. No queremos guerra, pero no pedimos permiso para existir. Y si para ser libres hay que resistir, resistiremos.
Yes, clearly, brothers and sisters are saying that they want peace. They don't want war, but they do not see it fit that they must apologize for existing, and therefore, if fight, they must, to maintain their sovereignty, they will fight the mighty bullies. And so, as the stage is set, let us take a look at the latest that we've learned with regards to this situation in Cuba. We've learned that Cuba, after 29 hours without electricity because their system was being sabotaged by the United States, we've heard the declaration by the President of the United States saying that, you know, they should be able to do whatever they want with the island of Cuba. Then the President of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, made this statement yesterday, March the 17th. They intend to and announced plans to take over the country, its resources, its properties, and even the very economy. They seek to suffocate in order to force us to surrender. And with regards to Cuba, how they have behaved, I really encourage you to take a look at this article that provides a very interesting summary of the situation in Cuba as it currently stands. And really, it's quite disturbing. I've had the privilege of traveling to Cuba a couple of times, and I can say that each of those occasions I have witnessed a different facet of the country. In 1998, when I was there for the first time, people were lining up to collect bread, and the embargo was quite harsh on the people. But even then, I found a valiant people in the mountain of the Sierra Maestra, where I met descendants of Haitians who had gone to cut sugarcane on the Cuban island, which is neighbor to Haiti, when the Americans occupied Cuba, and in the aftermath of the U.S. occupation of Haiti. Uh, and these people were talking about their pride in the fact that when the Barbudos went to the Sierra Maestra Mountains, Fidel, Che, and their companions found help from the Black Haitians who were in the mountains. And Fidel felt comfortable because he grew up with Haitians. His father was a plantation owner, and the Haitians, although at first they were afraid of the Barbudos, but they immediately, some of the young people, and I spoke with one of them, Ugan Pablo, who was explaining how eventually they understood that the Barbudos wanted to help them, as their existence until then was nothing but nightmare after nightmare, because Black people were being harassed and living a very miserable situation on the island. And what they said is, yes, we are still pretty much poor people, but the Ugan I was talking to, for instance, could point to several of his children who are doctors, lawyers, architects, agronomists, everybody with skills and knowledge that definitely improve the quality of life that their parents and their grandparents had known on the island. And they were very proud Cubans for that matter. And so, what I want to share with you now is this um, interview, or sorry, this text, which tells us how Cuba has survived the past 66 years of embargo. Basically, this is a crime that is happening in front of the world, and there are many people who are denouncing it. However, we are forced to admit that thus far we have not been able to reverse the situation, and the senseless suffering of the Cuban people has not stopped. The article starts thus. After toppling Venezuela's leader earlier this year, the Trump administration has turned its sight on Cuba. The near total blockade of the island is now posing the greatest challenge to the government since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Cuba is quickly running out of oil, creating a dire political and economic crisis for the island's 11 million residents. US President Donald Trump's embargo has prevented any oil tankers from reaching the island for months. A ship carrying Russian fuel is now reportedly on the way to the island to attempt to break the blockade, but the US has seized other ships that have previously tried. The Trump administration has also threatened tariffs on any nation that tries to send Cuba fuel, putting Latin American leaders in an uncomfortable position. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has called out the embargo as very unfair. But she's been careful not to antagonize Trump by putting an emphasis on the Cuban people, not the government. This is not the first time the US has isolated Cuba or coerced Latin American leaders to take part. Cuba has been under a US embargo for the past 66 years, which has stunted its economy and caused widespread human suffering. The island has always found a way to get by, but can it survive this new round of American pressure? I encourage you to check out this article, which really provides not only the current state, but speaks about the historical perspective. It's on the conversation.com website. And the picture here of young Cubans pinching their noses as they go through garbage, um, it reminds me of situations in my own native Haiti, where despite the effort that the locals are deploying to maintain their dignity, the abject poverty that they are forced to endure is a real challenge to the human soul. However, as you can see, those young people with their pressed uniforms and their parents, facing that challenge, the stench of that garbage, but still holding their heads high to educate themselves. And this is an act of resistance. And I salute these young brothers and sisters on the island. I mentioned the first time I went to Cuba, and then I went back in 2016 with my mother, who insisted on being on the island of Fidel Castro, a man that she always admired. And at the time, Fidel was 90 years old. And although we did not get to greet Fidel Castro, but we met so many hopeful Cubans. At the time, some of the changes that we observed, there were Airbnbs, massage parlors, all kinds of people doing business. And I recall my conversation with a young Cuban who was explaining how he really would love to be able to travel and study abroad. And then when I asked him, so what would be your aspiration? He says, well, to come back to Cuba and apply and start business. And I say, yeah, but don't you, like you said, you would like to study in England or Canada. He says, yeah, but wouldn't you want to stay in those countries? And he was adamant and quick about it. No, I want to come back to Cuba. Despite whatever you might hear in terms of propaganda, the Cuban people are resisting. And that's also what I saw when I returned in 2018 with my family. And we had a wonderful time in the city. Now, um, let us see what the impact has been on the people, especially in the last few uh, months, where since the Trump administration had really increased the attack on Cuba. The embargo prevented Cuba from reaching the modern technological age. That's an understatement. Instead, it existed in a socialist bubble, emphasizing the care of its people over economic development. You can see that in the buildings. You can see that in many infrastructures um, that are outdated under repair uh, at the same time. Okay, look at what these other paragraphs are telling us, which explains the extent of the crime because it also tells us what could have been, what should have been, what can still be if, as a human family, we stand up in solidarity with our brothers and sisters. Cuba's Cold War economic growth was comparable to its neighbors, despite those 60 years of embargo. In 1970, the nominal GDP per capita for Cuba was 645 US dollars, slightly lower than Mexico and about double the Dominican Republic. By 1990, it was 2,565 US dollars, about 80% of Mexico's, and more than triple the Dominican Republic's. Cuba was not industrialized, but the country did reach full literacy before any other Latin American nation and extended healthcare to all Cubans. Cuba then exported its teachers and doctors throughout Latin America and beyond, and indeed, way beyond. This picture here is showing you Cuban doctors uh, caring for Haitian patients after the 2010 earthquake, when my native country was hit by this huge earthquake that caused hundreds and thousands of deaths. But the Cuban doctors were already there. They were already there because when the president of Haiti and the president of Cuba in 1995 uh, begun the negotiations, and in 1996 reinstated the diplomatic relations between the two islands, neighbors, which the Americans forbid under the dictatorship of Duvalier, because Duvalier was their boy. Um, well, there was no relationship between the two countries, and so when President Aristide and President Castro renewed those relationships, then the Cuban doctors started coming to Haiti, and that's why when the earthquake happened, they were the first ones there. And no, they weren't waving flags and looking for cameras. They were doing what doctors are supposed to do, caring for their brothers and sisters. When the Cuban military defeated the CIA's trained force in exiled Cuban fighters at the Bay of Pigs in 1961, Castro was lauded for standing up to the US, though few knew of the military and intelligence support coming from the Soviets. And when President John F. Kennedy began the campaign to remove Cuba from the Organization of American States in 1961, most Latin American democracies moved to block it. This is very important to note here, that, you know, what we are witnessing here is not the behavior of an erratic, crazy, right wing, racist, white American president, and as if the previous ones were different in their behavior towards Cuba. No, this is JFK, okay, who was doing this. So it doesn't matter whether the American president is Democrat, Republican, black, or white, their behavior is always despicable when it comes to how they treat our Cuban neighbors. Kennedy passed the Foreign Assistance Act in 1962, which established a total blockade of the island and prohibited US aid to any country providing assistance to Cuba. See, that's another behavior of these narcissistic bullies. Okay, they're not satisfied that they're bullying the country and the people, but they want to prevent others from behaving normally towards them. And this is exactly the same thing they did towards Haiti when we abolished racial slavery in 1803. The OAS removed Cuba as a member the following year, and in 1964 voted to embargo all trade to Cuba except food and medicine. And a point of shame here for us Haitians, whereas we have a beautiful history of mutual help, with Cuba, where, for instance, the Cuban founder, Jose Marti, lived in Haiti for several weeks, even months, in northern Haiti, in Cap Haitien. And we provided all kinds of help to Jose Marti for the liberation of Cuba. And likewise, I was mentioning earlier how Fidel and the Barbudos received help in the Sierra Maestra from the Haitians, and Haitians participated in the revolution. However, Haiti also betrayed Cuba in 1964. The deciding vote to oust Cuba from the OAS was from the Haitian ambassador, and in recompense, or in to praise, or to give Duvalier his due, okay, the Americans gave him enough money to build the airport that we have now in Port-au-Prince. So it's money, it's the betrayal money that built that airport. Something that most Haitians are not at all proud of, because around that time, um, this vote was not at all justified. And it wasn't the only time that uh, Haitian puppet leaders had betrayed Cuba. So the Cuban Revolution did wonders not only in the Caribbean, but also in other parts of the world, including Africa. So, okay, um, today we're talking about the fact that Donald Trump is talking about taking over Cuba. So we're talking about imperialism. We're talking about, foreign countries invading another one. So what about Cuba? Well, hasn't Cuba also sent boots to Africa? Okay, in what instances? What were they doing there? Well, let us look at the difference between when Cuba intervenes and when Yankees do. This is a direct quote from a ancestor now, former Cuban President Fidel Castro. When the invasion of Angola by regular South African troops started on the 23rd of October 1975, right? We could not sit idle. And when the MPLA asked us for help, we offered the necessary aid to prevent apartheid from making itself comfortable in Angola. Right, that's right. So Cuba sent help to the Africans who were trying to liberate their countries, including in Angola. Whereas the white supremacists, the United States, Britain, Canada, okay, they supported the Boer regime in South Africa. No, they weren't there for the same reasons. And you can see all of the early revolutionary leaders of liberated Africa in the 60s were always grateful to Fidel Castro. That's why when Nelson Wolilala Mandela was released, he knew that it was his duty to go and thank Fidel Castro in Cuba. So, no, it's not the fact that um, you have foreign troops in a country, it's what brought them there. And whereas when the Americans intervene, they claim that they are there, like they said when they were coming to Haiti in 1915, that they are there to help their black brother put their disorderly house in order. This is always what they say, right? Well, what you see as the outcome is not like what happened in Africa, where you have a people that liberate themselves from an oppressor, but rather that the United States establish oppressors over the people. These are two completely different outcomes. And it is the people that invited the Cubans to come and help them. And they helped them in the way they asked, not in the way the Yankees show up and they give you what you never asked for, such as disease, including sexually transmitted ones. So, yeah, Donald Trump said, I do believe I will have the honor of taking Cuba in some form, whether I free it or take it. He doesn't know the difference between the two. I think I could do whatever I want with it. Yeah, you think, Donald Trump. This is the same Donald Trump who joined fellow aggressor Benjamin Netanyahu in a foolish assault against Iran and is now knocking desperately on doors of NATO countries to join their clan of global bullies. But I say we got to be careful not to get distracted by the antics of this accused pedophile because he's not acting alone and is not acting only on his own behalf, but it is a clan. And some of the ones that are pretending not to be part of the clan are actually acting behind the scenes to support him in his crimes. And that's why, just like happened with apartheid South Africa, many of the folks who were supporting the Boer regime later on write fake books to try to pretend that they were fighting apartheid. No, that's not true. We know exactly who was truly fighting apartheid. We know who sold information that led to the capture of Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela so that he lost 27 years of his youthful life, who led to the killing of Patrice Lumumba, Robert Sobukwe, and others. Okay. On the other hand, citizens of the world are clamoring for human decency to prevail against the deadly US blockade of Cuba. Which of these calls for brotherly support sounds more compelling to you? What relevant historical references may guide our choices? What would Jesus do if he were real? But as we spoke earlier, um, Jesus, whether white or black Jesus, doesn't do anything, doesn't exist. And this is not where we need to put our focus. We actually can do something real, where in reality, it is up to us to do what is required and not to be hoping on some imaginary being, to intervene on our behalf. So we saw that in the previous episodes when we were talking about Muhammad Ali, the stance that he took when it was his time to make a statement of courage. And Muhammad Ali, very brave, majestic, said that he's not going to fight in Vietnam for the criminals, and that instead he's going to fight his enemies right there in the United States because this is where they are. Now, not everybody has to be as eloquent or even courageous as Muhammad Ali. We all have our limitations. But I think those examples are things that we must refer to in order to get inspiration for what is our duty, what is our opportunity, if I may put it this way, in this challenging time that is ours. Here's an example here. Today is an anniversary, and of course, I would not finish this program without mentioning this important anniversary. Today is the 18th of March, and the 18th of March 2011, the president of Haiti, whom you see here with Fidel Castro, was returning to his homeland from exile in South Africa. And this return is extraordinary because it was the second time a US president named George Bush, because Bush the father, or Bush, Papa Bush, kidnapped President Aristide in a coup in 1991, where they used the US, the so-called Haitian army at the time to conduct the coup. And Baby Bush, or Bush the Lesser, conducted the second kidnapping and coup in 2004. And after 7 years in exile, President Aristide, who was first taken to the Central African Republic, then managed to return to the hemisphere to reconnect with their two small daughters, then spent 7 years in South Africa while he finished his PhD and taught at university, but insisted he wanted to return to Haiti. And despite the opposition of Barack Obama, he returned home. And that return happened not because of white Jesus or black Jesus or any other Jesus for that matter, or not because of the ancestral spirits, okay, from voodoo, but because of black solidarity, flesh and blood human beings who stood up to the bullies to undo the kidnapping of Haiti's president. And so I will now share with you this excerpt from Amy Goodman of Democracy Now!, who covered the return of President Aristide to Haiti. And this is a video montage that I did a few years back, and it includes the excerpts from Amy Goodman, and I really encourage you to watch the whole thing at your own leisure. But I'm just going to share with you a minute and a half from this, because I think it's very, very important for us to be mindful that we are not powerless, and there is something that we can do about the situation. And there are many things that we must do in resistance.
At the front door, there was a huge clamor, and it was the Aristides coming in, but they could barely get in. They were being pulled through. First the children, then Mildred Aristide, then President Aristide himself.
Did you get inside of the house?
No,
you couldn't, right?
We went to the airport because we had to leave, and so
Okay.
That was the last time I saw him.
Okay.
And the medical school that President Aristide established and took so much pride in, well, it was turned into a U.S. military barracks, and the students were then sent to Cuba to get a medical education. Some of them came here to greet President Aristide today.
My name is Dr. Tubiko Bell.
And did you train at the medical school, President Aristide's medical school?
Yes, we start a medical school at Fondation Aristide University at 2001. After 2004, we go at Cuba to finish medical school, and now we are there in Haiti to help Asian people.
2004. What happened to the medical school after the coup?
In 2004, military take the medical school and put military base in the medical school.
Yes. So you heard it. That's what was done back in the time that there was a foreign intervention in Haiti. That was the UN, led by the United States, occupied Haiti after the coup in 2004, and they turned a rare university, a medical school in Haiti, into army barracks. And so, if you look at what President Aristide was doing in Haiti and what Fidel Castro was doing in Cuba, what Thomas Sankara was doing in Burkina Faso, it is not difficult to understand the motivation of the Americans when they attack these leaders of our countries. If you are investing in education, in healthcare, you are the enemy of the bullies. This should tell us all we need to know about the nature of these invasions. Yes, in Christian literature, it talks about, being one's brother's keeper. But throughout history, we saw that the Christians, the white Christians, were always full of shit, right? They never showed up for the good reasons. They may profess whatever they wish, but that's not what they were doing. No, Fidel Castro, it's not Jesus who told him that, the doctors that he's training, the teachers that they are training in Cuba must be put um, to the service of humanity. Human decency is something that we all possess. You don't need extraterrestrials, whether you name them Jesus or whatever, to tell you that. We all know that. And this is what we've been discussing in this program for several weeks now. And so that solidarity, that sense of, being one's brother's keeper is nothing new. In fact, if you go to ancient times, you can look at the behavior of this African pharaoh, Pianki. I don't know if you say it differently in English or French, but the father of, or the uncle of Taharka, because it's Taharka who was the general who actually left Egypt and Nubia, because that's the time when the Nubians were ruling all of the region. And they went to rescue the people of Judea, including the city of Jerusalem that was at the time besieged by the Assyrians. So these Africans liberated Jerusalem. And as a Jewish author, Canadian Jewish author, Henri Aubin described in the interview that I did with him and in his book, The Rescue of Jerusalem, were it not for this action that happened in 701, there would be no Judaism, no Christianity, and likely no Islam. Okay? So, Africans who went to rescue their fellow man who was besieged by the all powerful Assyrian army. And for those of you who read the Bible, you can check in the book of Kings and the other books in the Bible where they refer to it very briefly. But that's the detective work that Henri Aubin did. And he explains in his book also the motivation for his research, because in fact, he was looking for stories to tell his adopted son, who is biologically of Haitian parents. So, he's white, his wife is white, his other children are, adopted. And so he wanted to find stories, and then fell on this amazing story and was enraged at the fact that this story, which was known during antiquity, was buried because they didn't want to give due credit to these black Africans who rescued Jerusalem. If you look at Marcus Mosiah Garvey, this majestic brother who was born on the island of Jamaica and lived in the United States for a number of years before returning to Jamaica. And he created this majestic organization called the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, with the Black Star Line ship and everything. And Marcus Mosiah Garvey in 1924 wrote a very important letter to the Haitian president, Louis Borneau, acknowledging the fact that Haiti is under US occupation. It was working towards 10 years of that ongoing US occupation with all kinds of massacres against the black masses by the Yankees. And Marcus Garvey offered support from the black world, as at the time he was one of the most respected black leaders in the world, talking about the necessity to show solidarity. And that solidarity with Marcus Mosiah Garvey reminding us, like Malcolm did, that the fact that you were born on the island of Haiti as opposed to the island of Barbados, as opposed to mainland USA, as opposed to Ghana, doesn't transform the fact that you are a son or a daughter of Africa and we are family in the very real sense. And so therefore, because we were being oppressed wherever we were by a common enemy, we needed to stand to defend our people. And Garvey asked no permission to do that. But even Garvey and others understood that solidarity was not on the basis of whether we share the same ethnic origin. And that's what El Che Guevara understood also, or Fidel, when they offered their help, as they had received help in Cuba from Africans. Well, they also helped Africans liberate their countries. And so Ghanaians and Cubans are indeed friends and sometimes family, freedom fighters all the world over, as you can see on the signs here. And whether you go to Guinea and Amilcar Cabral and all the other comrades understood the importance of Cuban solidarity at the time. So, did it end then? No. Today, you and I can do our part in many different ways. As Donald Trump and his racist pedophiles feel no shame in behaving as barbaric as their imagination allows them to, so should we, decent human beings of all creeds and shades of skin, must do our part. And here's an example of two organizations, one in Canada and one in the United States. I suggest that you check out their websites, ifconews.org. If you go on their website, you'll see that these brothers and sisters have been conducting trips to Cuba for nearly the 66 years of the embargo, braving the consequences that they may face when returning to the United States. These are American citizens who say, hell no, we're not going to participate in this crime against humanity. And it's not sufficient to simply say that we disagree with it. We're going to go and meet our brothers and sisters in Cuba and bring them basic necessities that they lack because of this cruel embargo. And so the sister says, I am going to Cuba. and you might want to find out how they do it and how you can contribute. And I've interviewed a few people who've participated in these trips, and it's always their testimony that what they receive from their brothers and sisters in Cuba in terms of humanity, brotherhood, sisterhood, definitely compensates for any strife or difficulty that the barbaric US government might put on their path. And here in Canada, Canada doesn't stop people from going to Cuba, although every now and again we get a cowardly leader here who tries to, cater to whatever the whims of the US dictator is, and tries to, put um, restrictions on what can be done with regards to solidarity with Cuba. Certainly, there is no real um, collaboration to the level that it could exist with Cuba, whether it is scientifically and all of that. We think that's a major mistake. Canadian academics, I really encourage you guys to seek out your brothers and sisters on the island and see, what Cuba and Canada can do together in scientific research. It will be good for humanity. Don't listen to the bullies. We must do something that is courageous and that is righteous. So Canadian Network on Cuba.ca. Check out their website. There are demonstrations being organized. There are petitions that are putting pressure on Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and his government to stop being cowardly and to denounce the US embargo and to actually ship oil to Cuba so that they can run their electric grid. So we understand that electricity came back, but obviously they're saying they don't know for how long. We saw the brave gesture of the president of Mexico. We're asking her to hold on tight and maintain that. We hear that there is a tanker coming from Russia. In any case, Marco Rubio and Donald Trump and Hegseth and all these other redneck criminals, we need to subdue them before it's too late. It will cost humanity and the United States far less if instead of waging all of these unnecessary wars and basically harassment attacks, kidnapping the president of Venezuela and type of thing, it would cost so much less if they simply go on with the trial of the pedophiles. That's what it's all about, right? They're just trying to protect all of these pedophiles that are in the UK, in the United States, and all over Europe, and some, like we spoke the other day about Nygaard in Canada. Um, it might be complex. We understand that these are powerful people, but they're also victims who require justice. And so garner some courage and arrest the pedophiles rather than harassing the good people of the world. This is what I had to share with you, brothers and sisters. Perhaps one phone call, maybe. That is, if you are extra quick, I will entertain maybe one phone call at 613-482-2549. This program airs every Wednesday at 7 p.m. This is the 50th program. All of the others are accessible from my website, jafricaiti.com. And on Wednesday, we have a program in Haitian Creole titled Cause Nef Takuze Fre. And we have this Sunday coming Jérémy Dupin, who is a journalist who's been covering situations in Haiti and other places in the world. And we're going to do all of that in Haitian Creole. So please, if you do understand the language, tune in. We got stuff to talk about, family. All right, that's all I had for you, brothers and sisters. Let's catch up next week. Peace.
Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites.
Jésus, par ton sang précieux, enlève mon iniquité. Regarde-moi sur les cieux, dis-moi que tu m'as pardonné. J'ai longtemps erré cœur rebelle, mais j'entends ta voix qui m'appelle. Au pied de ta croix maintenant, tout confus, brisé, je me rends. Blanc, blanc, plus blanc que neige, blanc, plus blanc que neige, lavé dans le sang de l'agneau, je serai plus blanc que la neige.
Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. 1 Samuel 15.